Hey there, interwebs, I hope you're doing well. So for today's video, instead of doing my normal Friday videos, which are more heavily edited, produced, and let's just admit it, filled with my freaking amazing costumes lately, like, I've been killing it with the costumes, let's just all be honest here, alright? Just validate me, please. But we're not going to be doing that today, unfortunately, because today we're going to kind of be doing a sort of stripped down video for two distinct reasons. The first and most important of which is that I'm going to be talking about a fairly serious issue surrounding an upcoming autism charity event, Color the Spectrum, which is perhaps one of the biggest autism charity events that has happened in the past 2 years. And given that this is happening next week, I felt like the sooner I got this video out, the better. And so sadly, that means no costumes. But before we get into that, I also want to briefly mention the other reason why this video is going to be a little bit more stripped down, because next week, on Friday, August 30th at 11 a.m. Pacific time, I am going to be releasing one of my biggest videos that I've ever done on this channel, one which will contain a big announcement about both this channel and my life. And so considering that I'm still kind of working on that and editing that and finalizing that as I record this, that's part of the reason why this is going to be a little bit more stripped down for this week. So please, if you can, come join me for the premiere of that video, which like I said, it will be at 11, but though the video will be up after that, of course. But it's going to be the only video that's going to be going up on this channel next week in honor of how big it is and how important it is. So I'm really excited to share both it and the news that's within it with all of you. But enough about me. I know. It's sad, but we have to talk about something more important, because we have to talk about something more important, the Color the Spectrum charity and Mark Rober, as well as the controversy surrounding the event and its main sponsor, Next for Autism. Despite what I'm sure are some good intentions and true caring by many folks involved in this situation for the autistic community as a whole. I'm going to try and do this with my normal even-handedness. I want to try and give credit, as much credit where I can, to people that I'm criticizing, and sort of try to do my best to sort of see all sides of the issue as best I can with this. But at the end of the day, I'm just going to sort of lay it out here right up front. I don't think that people should be supporting this event for all the reasons that I will be talking about in this video. So I'm just going to lay that out up front. But I will, again, try to be as charitable as I possibly can to all parties involved. Also, for those of you who may not be familiar with me or my channel, just so everyone knows, I myself am autistic and a member of the autistic community. So if you want to know more about my own personal experiences with that, and me sort of talking also about Star Trek for a bit, because that's what I like to do, I shared some of my own personal experiences with being on the spectrum in this video that I'll link there, and also down in the down below. So let's get to the actual meat of this. What's going on with the Color the Spectrum charity event? What even is it? What's the issue? And what are some of the pieces and problems that have gone into all of this? And why do I personally think that you shouldn't support it? So, the Color the Spectrum event was announced by YouTuber Mark Rober in a recent video. Mark Rober is a former NASA engineer and currently huge YouTuber with over 18 million subscribers. And on his channel, he talks about science and gadgets and fun stuff like that. Honestly, given that I'm a huge sci-fi geek, I'm mildly surprised that I didn't actually know him specifically until this event came up, though I'm sure I've seen some of his videos in passing, because he seems like one of those guys that I would be super into, like a really smart, geeky dork who's a super nice guy who has a cool family and likes talking about, like I said, nerdy science stuff. That's my kind of person, like, to a T. And I want to be clear right up front, because whatever I'm going to say in the rest of this video, I want to make especially clear that Mark, to me, does seem like a kind and caring dude who really wants to do the best for the most people, especially when it comes to his son. So I just want to make that clear. I'm not necessarily criticizing him overall. I am criticizing some things that have gone on around this event that he has helped lead the charge of. But that, unfortunately, brings us to the issue at hand, because last week, on April 16th, 2021, Mark released a video called The Truth About My Son, a video which now has over 14 million views as of April 20th when I wrote this script. And in that video, he shared that his son is autistic, as well as discussed what it was like to be a parent of an autistic child, as well as some of the issues that his son faces as a result of being autistic. Overall, I think this video is actually really incredibly sweet. You get this feeling that the man knows his stuff for the most part, and he wants to be considerate of his son, But he also wants to use his extremely large platform to share the struggles autistic kids can face, as well as the struggles that he faces as a parent of an autistic child, as well as never losing sight of the fact that his son is a full, wonderful person and a loving person. For example, in the video, he does a great section on sensory overload, which is a feeling that many autistic folks, myself included, where we can't really focus on certain senses because we constantly are aware of all the sensory input that we're getting all around us. We just experience it all at once.
So if you and I were having a conversation here in this park, I can ignore everything around me and just focus on your voice. But if I had autism, I would hear the ice cream man ringing the bell behind me, and the kid crying because he's not getting any ice cream, and the cars going by, and the plane up there, as well as the train in the distance. Not to mention all of the different smells and the fact that the tag on my shirt is kind of rubbing on my back. It's sensory overload and everything comes in all at once, and it's really overwhelming and makes it hard to focus.
His bit about the tag there really hit me hard because, dear Lord, especially as a kid, I had to cut all the tags off my clothes because I couldn't even focus on anything because of how itchy they were. So they just distracted me and I had to cut them all off. So that reads really, really true, and I think he did a good job there. He also shares that his son loves to draw pictures of everyone he meets, which is incredibly adorable, but also dispels the common and harmful stereotype around autistic folks that we're cold, aloof, or unempathetic. So this video on the whole is just really sweet, and his son is really sweet, and you can really tell that for Mark this was very heartfelt and meaningful, especially when you learn that the main section of this video was filmed 2 years ago, and it took Mark actually that long to feel comfortable releasing the video to the internet. So you know that he really considered and thought about what it would mean to release this video. Now, that being said, while I have praised it, there are a few issues with the video that are worth mentioning here, even though they're kind of an aside to what our larger discussion is going to end up being. For example, Mark refers to his son as special needs, as well as having autism, as opposed to being autistic, which is kind of ableist language, even if it comes out of a good-natured desire to be kind. For example, calling someone special needs often feels like infantilization to many autistic folks, as well as condescending. Not every autistic person feels that way, but many do. Also, saying that someone has autism as opposed to being autistic implies that autism is something that afflicts you, like a disease or something like that, as opposed to something that you are. I don't have autism, I am autistic. Autism informs who I am as a person. If I wasn't autistic, I wouldn't be the person that I am. You can't cure autism because if you cured my autism, if that were even possible, you would be eliminating me as who I am. Yes, certain autistic traits can lead people to face issues in their life, like, for example, the sensory overload thing that we discussed earlier, and more stuff that I've spoken about in other videos, like for me, for example, my social anxiety, as well as there are many other things for many other people. Being autistic also informs a lot of my personality and things that I consider core to who I am. Like, for example, my love and hyperfixation on Star Trek, for example. You know, if I wasn't someone who hyperfixated on things, which is an autistic trait, I would not have found and focused so much on my love of Star Trek, which I think is a good and important and core thing to me. Autism is just a very broad term to describe a set of loose personality traits or similar issues that people may face in their lives. Not a thing to be treated. It's just something to discuss how people are as they exist in their life. Also, Mark's video has this section in it.
People with special needs might not fit the traditional criteria of success by benefiting GDP or getting a PhD to cure a disease, but they have such a net positive effect on the people that get to interact with them. They personify traits like perseverance, such as with Jason here, who has autism and was the dutiful sports equipment manager for 4 years, so the coach put him in for the last 4 minutes of the game his senior year. He sank not 1, not 2, but 6 3-pointers, including one right at the final buzzer, for a performance his supportive classmates will remember for the rest of their lives.
Now, to be fair, this kind of framing of things is nice, and I've used very similar framing about success, and I actually agree with Mark here. I don't think that we should quantify success by finances or professional success or educational success or things like that, but doing that kind of framing in a video like this kind of implies, and I don't think this is necessarily intentional, but it kind of pseudo-implies that autistic folks won't ever really be able to achieve those measures of success. kind of sort of saying that we can only be successful if we reframe our mindset or change how we think about the world or change what we consider to be successful. It's kind of shitty, to be honest, even though I know that's not his intention. Like, I feel like I have had professional and educational success. I mean, I am a middling YouTuber with crippling student debt and a weird love of beards, but I still think I'm successful, nonetheless. But also, there are many autistic people who have succeeded brilliantly in their lives. Like, look at Anthony Hopkins or Dan Aykroyd or Courtney Love and many, many other successful folks who have been diagnosed with autism. So we don't have to redefine the terms of what success is for autistic people to be considered successful right now. I, again, agree with the sentiment, but framing it this way in this video, talking about the problems facing autistic people, as Mark's done, kind of has this unfortunate implication to it, this infantilization to it. So these are issues that I found with Mark's video, but in all fairness, they are things that I personally have gotten wrong in the past. Like, for example, I've said in my life that I have autism as opposed to being autistic before, because I didn't really recognize or care too much about the distinction. But, you know, as I've learned and grown, I sort of have known better. So that said, while I don't necessarily want to give a man who has an 18 million subscriber following a complete pass on perpetuating these issues, especially when he had 2 years of lead time to ensure that he got it right, I can also kind of understand why the mistake was made. Anyways, these are all issues with Mark's video, but I bring all of them up because I want you to understand how the mindset of individuals when faced with discussing the autistic community, when put into large-scale groups, when put into large-scale organizations, can start to have really dark implications, even if on an individual level it's innocent and someone trying to be kind. Because this gets us into our next section where we have to talk about the Color the Spectrum charity event. Because at the end of his video, Mark announces the Color the Spectrum charity event, which is a huge charity event to raise money and awareness around autism. As I said, it's one of the biggest types of events like this ever done, and it has huge celebrity guests like Andy Samberg, Adam Sandler, John Oliver, Chris Rock, Conan O'Brien, Terry Crews, Luke Skywalker himself, Mark Hamill, Sarah Silverman, Stephen Colbert, Jon Stewart, and dear God, so many others, and it's being co-hosted by Jimmy Kimmel. He's one of the Kimmies. Kimmies? Kimmies. He's one of the Jimmies. I meant to say Jimmys. I said Kimmies. He's one of the Jimmies. Killed my joke there. But anyways, this is going to be a huge charity event, and it's going to be a live stream event here on YouTube on April 30th. The issue with this is, well, admittedly, there are a few things that there are issues with, but the biggest of which is that the charity is in partnership and to benefit Next for Autism. Now, before we get to Next for Autism, one other quick thing that is worth mentioning before we get to that part of it is the issue that this charity has as well on top of Next for Autism is that none of the announced celebrities involved in this event are, to my knowledge, autistic. I may be wrong in that, but that's the information I could find. And that's a huge issue because you're doing this whole event and not including a single autistic famous person as part of the main draw of the event. There's a saying in many marginalized communities that nothing about us without us. It's basically saying, you know, you shouldn't do anything for our community without members of that community being involved. And again, this is for any marginalized community. And the most obvious reason for this is we should just be included in things that are about us because it's about us. That just seems kind of obvious. If something's about us, we should probably be involved in it. But also, the real reason that this is a major issue is that if you don't include people of the group for which you're trying to discuss, benefit, or help, in this case, autistic folks, you are going to invariably, most likely, get things wrong because you are less likely to be aware of issues or problems or concerns that face that community. You know, we've seen this in the autistic community with the recent movie by Sia called Music, which I did a whole video on if you want to check that out. But I've also seen it in other areas too, like with the endless issues of transgender and larger LGBTQ representation that I've also discussed on this channel. And we're also seeing it with this event because, as I said, the event is in an effort to benefit Next for Autism, which finally brings us to what the issues with Next for Autism are. Quite frankly, there are a few things. First and foremost, Next for Autism has done work in partnership with another group that many of you may have already heard of called Autism Speaks. Autism Speaks, for those of you who don't know, is probably one of the most, if not the most, controversial autism charity group. There are many reasons for that, some of which I'll link down in the down below if you want to learn more, but the biggest and probably most pertinent to this discussion are that Autism Speaks has a history of fear-mongering about autism, saying that it is this horrible thing that destroys family and lives and everything about a person.
I am autism. I'm visible in your children, but if I can help it, I am invisible to you until it's too late. I know where you live, and guess what? I live there too. I hover around all of you. I know no color barrier, no religion, no morality, no currency. I speak your language fluently, and with every voice I take away, I acquire yet another language. I work very quickly. I work faster than pediatric AIDS, cancer, and diabetes combined. And if you are happily married, I will make sure that your marriage fails.
As well as the fact that they are putting money towards researching a cure for autism. Now, I spoke already about curing autism earlier in this video. It's not possible. Autism is a part of who I am. It's a part of me. Yes, there are issues I face because I have autistically coded traits, and some other autistic folks face even bigger challenges than I do. And yes, for me personally, I try to work through these issues through things like therapy, self-care, or even medication on certain things. But autism is also a thing that informs parts of myself that I love too, as I said before. And so to cure it, which isn't even possible, but even if it was, it would destroy me. To try to cure autism is eugenics. You're saying which traits in people are considered better or worth saving or needing a fixing or treatment. It's honestly gross and disgusting no matter how well-intentioned people going into searching for a cure for autism may be. Because a lot of people searching for a cure for autism, not all, but generally a lot of them are people who are caregivers of autistic folks. They're not actually autistic folks themselves. They're people who have to deal with some of the harder aspects of caring for someone with autism and so wish to cure it so they don't have to deal with it anymore. That's their hope in their mind. And again, I understand that to a point, but looking for a cure to try to say which traits of a person are worth saving, which parts of a person are worth saving, is eugenics and gross. But we've been talking about Autism Speaks, so let's go back to Next for Autism, because there are many issues surrounding that organization on its own beyond its working with Autism Speaks. First and foremost being that Next for Autism has been accused itself of being supportive and looking for a cure for autism, and using its funds to attempt to research one. Secondly, they also support applied behavior analysis, which is itself a kind of attempt to cure autism. It's a type of behavioral analysis that's trying to change behaviors of autistic children to appear non-autistic. But it's not actually trying to understand why a person is showing autistic traits. It's trying to force someone to not appear autistic instead of actually taking them on their own terms and helping them with who they are as a person. It's trying to make them hide their traits of who they are from the world in order for them to be more acceptable by society. It's not exactly a one-for-one, but it feels in many ways very akin to telling a LGBTQ person that they need to stay in the closet to pass as a straight person. To say, hey, you should just, you can be gay, just don't show it to anybody or anywhere. And obviously we know that it has many drastic mental health effects for LGBTQ people in a myriad of different ways, as well as stigma associated with being LGBTQ. And again, it's not an exact one-for-one, but there's a lot of similarities here with this idea of trying to force autistic people to appear non-autistic. Additionally, none of the Next for Autism's board members are members of the autistic community. Again, this is an issue because, again, nothing about us without us, which goes to the issues that we talked about earlier. Now, I would be remiss to not discuss that when these issues were raised about Next for Autism surrounding this charity event, Next for Autism on April 19th, 2020, released a statement on Twitter. At least that's where I found it. I'm sure they probably posted it at other places too. Now, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to show it to you here and link to it down below. But the relevant information for you to know is that they say in the statement that they only worked with Autism Speaks as part of expanding access to programs and services to autistic folks, never in support of a cure. So they weren't working with Autism Speaks on a cure in any way, shape, or form, just working with them on other areas to help autistic folks. They also state that they don't support finding a cure for autism, and that they believed that applied behavior analysis, which we talked about before, has changed enough since its inception and study that it doesn't harm autistic folks, that it's sort of evolved enough as a science. They also reiterate that they don't support any groups seeking to eliminate or prevent autism. Now, within the statement, they also use the phrase people with autism, which, again, as we said before, that goes back to that idea of autism being something that afflicts you, that is separate from you, as opposed to being a part of who you are. But again, common mistake, but it's something that you would think an organization like Next for Autism would avoid using, especially in this case, being linked with a controversy that is directly connected with that idea. But also in their statement, they link to an FAQ page on their website that does state, quote, Next for Autism is focused on services and supports. We do not believe autism is something to be prevented or cured. Next for Autism provides no funding or support for research into the cause or cure of autism. All monies raised are for services and supports. Next for Autism does not support eugenics. Now, I attempted to do a little bit of research using the Wayback Machine and a couple other ways that I have to look at pages' histories on this FAQ page. And from what I found, I cannot actually even be sure that this FAQ page existed before Monday. The earliest I found was a link to it being around on Monday, but not before that. That's not to say it didn't, but I also can't know what it said if it did. Though what I can say is that line that Next for Autism does not support eugenics, that specific line there, was not on the page until this Monday. So the page may have existed before Monday, it may not have, but it was also had a version of it that existed on the Monday of when I filmed this video that did not say Next for Autism does not support eugenics, though they did add it after this controversy for clarification. So just kind of want to make that known that this might have been a statement that they added on their FAQ page in sort of response to this controversy, but at the very least that eugenics line was added in response to the controversy. This isn't to say this wasn't necessarily something they believed or had stated on their website before Monday, but it is sort of an interesting note that I couldn't find any evidence of it existing prior to Monday. And this sort of informs a lot of the other stuff that I'm going to be talking about in just a second, because there are still some issues even after this statement, because not everything is so clear-cut as they make it seem in their response. First, they are still working with Autism Speaks. They openly admit that in the letter. Saying you work with a eugenics organization on specifically non-eugenics programs is still working with a eugenics organization, and it still gives them validity. To use an extreme example of this, just to highlight the point, not equating anyone with anything necessarily, but just to use an extreme example to highlight the point that I'm making, it would be like if I said, oh, I do work with Nazis, but only on non-anti-Semitic and racist stuff. That's not how that works. You would still be working with Nazis. When you work with someone like Autism Speaks, regardless of if you're working with them on their controversial platforms or ideas, you're still lending them support and validity as an organization overall, which enables them to continue and support their horrible stuff elsewhere. Moving on, though, Next for Autism also helped found the Center for Autism and the Developing Brain, a center whose mission statement still, as of the time of I'm recording this video, contains the statement that says that part of their mission is, quote, conducting research that enhances the understanding, the causes, treatment, and prevention of autism spectrum disorders. So, there is a part of Next for Autism that they helped fund that is still considered part of the organization, or at least something that they work with, that still apparently is funding research into a cure for autism. That's an issue. And additionally, as I said, there are still no board members on Next for Autism that are part of the community, though they do state in their statement that they are trying to change that, which I do commend them if that is actually what they are doing, though that may be something that they just said they're doing in their statement. I couldn't find any confirmation either way that that was something that they were attempting to do before this controversy. Again, they may have, I'm not saying they didn't, I just couldn't find confirmation of it in time for this video. Additionally, on top of all of this, Harry Slatkin, one of the co-founders of Next for Autism, said the following quote in an interview a few years ago for the magazine Town & Country. Now, I'm going to be reading this quote in just a second. It is about Harry's son, whose name is David, but before I read the quote, I kind of want to warn all of you that the quote does contain some horrible stuff, so if you don't want to hear that, skip to the time code below if you don't want to hear that or the discussion on it. Quote, we put locks on all the doors leading outside because we didn't want David possibly going into the pond. But there were times when you hoped he did. because you wouldn't want him to suffer like this all his life. So there's that quote, as well as that article, though this isn't Harry's words, but that article that quote is contained in goes on to say things like autism is so devastating, as well as more fear-mongering about autism. It's kind of a gross article overall, and again, it's not all from Harry, so I don't want to put it all on Harry Slatkin. But getting back to the quote, that quote is very loaded. I do get, to a degree, the feeling a parent might have when they are dealing with a child who is facing many issues, some of which may stem from them being autistic and have autistically coded traits. I can understand them having that feeling of wishing their child didn't have to suffer. I'm not going to tell a parent who is dealing with hardship like that they shouldn't or cannot feel that. I don't know. I have never been in that situation, but I do know that is not an uncommon feeling. And it doesn't mean that parents would ever act on that or want that to actually happen, but we feel what we feel sometimes. It's a feeling that many parents feel in a variety of situations, even around autistic kids. That being said, that is not something you share publicly in a magazine, especially when you are someone working for the autistic community. It can be seen as normalizing this idea that maybe autistic folks would be better off dead. It's not an uncommon sentiment, and I hope I don't have to explain why that's horrific. Even if the feeling that it's based off of is valid. You don't share that. Not in that way when you are a public figure working for an autism charity. Beyond that, though, a totally other board member for Next for Autism, Robert Smigel, stated in an article, which was a tribute to a recently passed away co-founder of Autism Speaks, this quote: "Acceptance isn't the first thing on your mind when your child starts displaying autistic traits." And then also within that tribute, they do advocate for cures for autism. To be fair, the tribute does acknowledge that there are some autistic folks who don't view autism as a problem, but then some ways makes the tribute worse, that they're still promoting a eugenics point of view despite clearly knowing better. And I also want to be clear that there are some autistic folks that resent being considered autistic, which I'm not going to invalidate. Like I said, there are people whose autistic traits make them suffer a lot in life. And so I'm not going to tell them not to resent that feeling. But I still am someone who does not believe in something like a search for a cure for autism, because I do believe that it is a form of eugenics. But anyways, going back to the issue at hand, this is what we're left with. If I'm being charitable, all of these things I pointed out around Next for Autism could have been outdated information. Maybe Next for Autism, as they state in their response to the controversy, has learned from past mistakes and doesn't currently support a cure for autism. Maybe they've wisened up. But the fact that they helped fund a center which, as of this recording, still states in their mission that they're looking for a cure, as well as the fact that they have board members who have stated their belief in looking for a cure, as well as none of those board members being autistic, as well as the fact that they are working with an organization, Autism Speaks, that is overtly looking for a cure for autism, as well as their support of the practice of ABA, I have to say, it's not really looking good for them. I am certainly a benefit of the doubt kind of person, but even within that, giving them this benefit of the doubt feels very difficult in this situation. And even at the very best, even if I lend them every single benefit of the doubt that I possibly could, the fact that they haven't completely disavowed groups like Autism Speaks, despite acknowledging their issues, as well as them disavowing the practice of ABA, there's still issues there, even if I do give them all the benefit of the doubts. That being said, the person in this situation that I can give the benefit of the doubt to is Mark Rober, a man who seems to really love his son and is trying to do something good for the autistic community with this charity event and his huge platform. But he really seems to have missed the mark here, having not done his research around which groups he was working with his huge platform. And despite what I'm sure are very caring and good intentions, he may end up helping, at the very least, a very problematic organization through a charity event that does not include any autistic folks at all, at least on the front line of it. It's troubling. And it's a continuing trend we've seen around the autistic community lately, with big projects like Sia's music continually being the main talking point about the autistic community in the mainstream that never actually includes autistic people, and as a result gets things wrong and even perpetuates harmful ideas and stereotypes. It's people trying to care for the autistic community without trying to actually include us, but instead, as a result, infantilizing us, talking down to us, and helping organizations that may hurt us, and ultimately not seeing us for who we are. Anyways, I hope that this video helped illuminate my concerns with the Color the Spectrum charity event. But that being said, I want to hear your thoughts on this because, like I said, there is a lot of gray area. There's a lot of benefit of the doubt stuff that we could talk about here. So I kind of want this to be an open impetus for discussion about this event, as opposed to just me putting a hard down line like this is what I feel. This should be the beginning of a conversation, as I try to make all of my videos be. That being said, speaking of my videos, thank you for watching this one. Don't forget next week that I have that big video coming out next Friday that I'm very excited about. The link to that premiere for that video should hopefully be going up, if it's not already up right now, within the next day or so. Don't forget also to subscribe to this channel. Also, I have a Patreon that you can help support me at. But beyond all of that stuff, I hope that you, as always, live long and prosper. Here we go. So I'm finally here, performing for you. If you know the words, you can join in too. Put your hands together if you want to clap, as I thank you all with this patron rap. Catherine Lambeth, Miranda Janelle, Ashley Allen, Bo Kikio, Eli Bergmash, Ashlyn Solstice, John Cool, Greg Gillum, Stephen Kleinard, Randy Thompson, Felicia Toast, Wellington Marcus, Boyd Earl and Mary Beth Earl, Stephen Schuhart, Wayne Twitchell, Corey Honkanen, Anvale Dunn, A Man Chooses, A Slave Obeys, Ish the Mad, Dominic Noble, Buttoneer, John Steele, What Does God Need with a Starship? Michael Beam, Meadow Whisperer, William Steele, Chamomile Tea, BBD, Munir Amlani, Jason Knott, John Weatherby, Maeve Liama, Bree Beecher, Andrew K., Nathan Steele, Sky Skinner, Sean Piper, Flynn, Wen Dizzle Bizzle, Tiffany Danger, Cass the Last, Laura Dermero, Geek Filter, Mari Neckar, Troy Stull, Gretchen Badger, Pissed and Twisted Garage, Bush, Jane Packard, James Krivda, Din W, Randy E D, Ellie O'Dare, John H. McDougall, Celestial John, Jacob Tovar, Sarah Bystam, Jessica Chapman, Lysa, Nikki Gordon Bloomfield, Polly Mina, Andrew Lamoureux, Jennifer Fuss, Zone 1 Librarian, Jenny Mabel, and Michael Hardy. Thank you so much. I hope you appreciate me being a dorky weirdo that's totally off key with any sort of beat, but thank you so much, patrons. I love you all.